I have a bunch of friends live in LA, lefty types, but I guess you would call them default liberal. Some of them are more politically active just because they work in media. And I remember having conversations with 6-7 years ago about the far left's hatred of Jews and Israel, and how I don't understand how, like, hey, look, you work in Hollywood, you're Jewish, you understand, what's going on, but you're supporting these far leftists who are on video saying they want to eradicate. I'm not Israel. I'm not. Well, maybe it's a little strong language, but you had that video of Patrisse Cullors of BLM saying they want to end the imperial project called Israel. Like, what do you think that means when they say from the river to the sea? And these people are like, oh, no, I don't believe any of that. Well, it's a cold splash of water in the face right now.
Yes.
When you're seeing in Washington, they're chanting, there is only one solution. Intifada revolution. I want to make sure I get the full quote, but they'll try and downplay it and say, no, intifada just means we're going to come and revolt against the government. But everybody knows what one solution means. And when they chant from the river to the sea, then when you watch what Hamas does. So I bring this up just to kind of bring it back to the greater what's happening here around the world. But you made a point about it's going to be a wake up call to a lot of these feminists. And I'm wondering what my lefty friends, who many of them were Jewish, working in the entertainment industry, what it must have been like. And I feel bad for them. I'm not trying to drag them, to wake up and to see everything they put their weight behind. Every BLM post, to see Black Lives Matter post a picture of a paraglider saying they support this.
Yep.
When they went and killed civilians, children, indiscriminately. And we're told by more pro-Palestinian individuals. We had Max Blumenthal on the show. I had tremendous respect for him. But he said Hamas saw the music festival as a target of opportunity. And it is their intention to target civilians to use as bargaining chips against Israel. This is war. There are no rules and morality in war. We grew up in the United States because we are so protected and so pampered. This breeds, I'm going to become totally blunt and very direct. I'm not saying it only breeds this, but feminism, I believe, can only exist in what the United States has created.
Yes.
It is so safe. It is so protected. Women, go about your business. You are free. Whereas in the majority of the world, you see these stories of the women who go hiking in Morocco by themselves.
Yep.
And what happens? What we see now with Hamas is a wake-up call to many of these lefty feminist types who supported BLM to realize these people hate you. They want to kill you. And if it was not for our security apparatus, yeah, you'd be living in a very brutal, cold reality.
I mean, this whole doctrine of, multiculturalism, anti-colonialism, it was cooked up inside the West. And it was cooked up in a Western environment. And when you step outside that environment and you apply it, you suddenly realize it means something totally different than what these sort of campus activist types think. So when you think, for example, about Hamas and just the recent massacre, in some sense, it is even worse than the Nazis. And what I mean is not in scale, of course, but what I mean is the Nazis were sufficiently Western to realize that they had to hide their crimes, right? The death camps, there's not a single death camp that was in Germany. Think of it. They were all in the occupied territories. They were in Poland because the Nazis realized we can't tell the German people we're doing this. We got to hide it. Hamas doesn't hide it. If they kill a kid, they're laughing while they're doing it, and then they put the video themselves. They're not waiting for some journalist to expose them. But they're exposing themselves.
I think that shows how the Nazis were a more terrifying evil, because by hiding it, they seek to get away with it.
But what's great, to get back to what liberals must be waking up to right now, I mean, I hope this will last, and I hope they have noticed. It was the left that encouraged BLM, that encouraged these riots and the attacks on the police, and all cops are bastards and burning down police stations. They will always take the side of the barbarians. They're always on the side of the violent. And for the first time now, hallelujah, in Israel, we see, oh my gosh, you're going to take the side of the civilized people this time. Your first time. I mean, of course BLM supports Hamas. What did you think? And can we get a list of the corporations and the celebrities that donated to Black Lives Matter, now all out supporting Hamas? I just hope that the pushback that happened so fast, so quickly, I hope it didn't happen so quickly that they suddenly realized, oh crap, we stepped in it, and pull back. No, tell us what you really think. Also I'm sorry, just one more thing, but also the diversity and diversities are saying, and sorry you guys, but white mans are really SOL. all the.
I'm actually mixed race, so I'm
think
okay.
it's only
No,
counts.
that is not going to count. David Cates.
It's actually
Good luck
worse.
to ya. All the police chiefs, all the head of universities, all the heads of symphonies. I mean, read Heather McDonald's book. I'm constantly interviewing her on my Substack. She has this book, When Race Trumps Merit, and it's unbelievable how every important position in this country has been replaced by usually a black woman, especially at the universities. And now we have at Yale. No, I'm sorry, it's Harvard. The president of the Kennedy School at Harvard is giving all these pro-Hamas statements, and all the big, very wealthy, very smart, well, not that smart because they were donating until now, Jewish donors saying, that's it, no more, we're cutting off donations. Something else Heather McDonald has been saying to rich donors. Stop giving to these universities. They hate you.
I'm actually deeply offended by the notion that we have been screaming for years, BLM is deeply anti-Semitic. And I'm not saying that in any cute kind of way.
How
the
about
left,
just anti-white, anti-American?
well, for sure, but to these people
More
who,
important to me.
to many of these wealthy individuals who are donating to these universities, you realize you're supporting the like very evil individuals. When they say decolonize, what do you think that means? And they've been holding up those signs for a decade. And these donors to these universities are just like, I wonder what that's all about, bro. They're talking about killing the people who are here.
Yes.
And it's fascinating. When a Yale professor put out a statement just a couple days ago saying settlers are not civilians. That statement is to justify the targeting of innocent children, women, and men
Murder.
who were massacred in their homes without warning, because to them, and they're chanting in the streets.
Combatants.
Exactly.
The settlers as not civilians is a variation of systemic racism, because systemic racism is a way of saying I don't have to find a racist. I don't have to find a white guy and a black guy who applied for a job. The black guy was better qualified. The white guy got the job. Hey, we found a racist, someone who did that. No, systemic racism locates the problem in a system, and similarly here, the settlements become the equivalent of the system. And so everybody in those settlements who could be innocent themselves, they could even be kids, nevertheless become occupiers.
Yeah, I remember I was at a protest for Native American issues, and they were saying our land was stolen. It's a sacred burial ground. And when I asked the activists, I was like, what part of it is the sacred burial ground? And they're like, oh, all that. And I'm like, and just that? Like, well, all that too. And it basically
Just a vague hand gesture everywhere.
but
It's sort of where my hand is pointing.
to be
As far as the
fair,
eye can see.
these are just leftist activists saying this.
Right.
And so I'm not speaking on behalf of Native Americans who are concerned about what land they may have had burial, cemeteries or whatever on. But the activists' view was all of it. Just everything you can
Right.
see belongs to them and should be reverted. And it's like, well, hold on, that's not reality. Okay, people live here. We're not gonna, we're not gonna go to some dude's house in Pittsburgh and be like, well, I'm sorry, man. This, 200 years ago, this land belonged to somebody else, so it's gone now. That's insane.
Not only that, but I mean, think about it this way. The whole claim is just based upon what you got there first. I mean, does the first Bedouin who arrives at an oasis own the oasis?
Also, they weren't there first. There was another Indian tribe
well, that's
there they
right.
slaughtered. And before that, there was another Indian tribe that they slaughtered. They were just migrants slaughtering one another until the white man came with his guns and won a war. And that's how territory is taken. How do you think Israel was created?
Not just that. When the Native Americans were warring with each other to take land, white men showed up and warred with each other over that land, and you had colonial inter-European
Right,
conflict
right.
in the New World. It's just the world is.
But only white or Western, whatever you want to say, European. I mean, I generally like white people, but one thing I really hate about them is this weird suicidal gene they have. There's no other ethnic group. There are no other countries that say, we suck. We suck here. You can have our country. No, every other ethnic group, we're the best. Hispanics are the best. It's not even Hispanics. It's Mexicans, Ecuadorians. We crush, we kill. No, only white people. We suck.
Well, here's the dangerous thing about the left's ideology. It is only applied to the United States because when you bring the same concepts to Europe, things get really weird because they talk about indigenous rights. So what do you end up with? You end up with white identitarian groups in Europe saying indigenous rights. We
They're
completely
like, thank
agree.
you so much for this.
Yeah, they hold the signs saying indigenous people's rights, and they make the same arguments the left makes here as to why they oppose immigration in Europe. And it's like, well, okay, I mean, That's the left's
I'd
argument,
rather
right?
take Israel as our lodestar. If we could do 1/10 of what they do. Oh, did you see my proposed solution for what's happening in the Middle East? I think it's really perfect. We take all their Palestinians, they take all our illegals. They get drywalling.
Yeah,
We don't have a problem.
Well, it's interesting how they keep describing Israel as this kind of occupying power without asking, well, wait a minute, how did this region start out? Well, first of all, the Jews were there first. It was their land. Then they go into the diaspora. The Romans smash them and they take off. Then you get a bunch of Muslim farmers and sheep herders over there. But Islam comes around in the 7th century and conquers that whole region, which was, by the way, almost all Christian. Jordan was Christian. Syria was Christian. So these are Christian lands forcibly conquered by Islam. And yet somehow Islam gets out of this sort of reputation of being an occupier, and they're somehow able to pin that on the Jews. I mean, it's just a kind of an amazing sleight of hand.
I mean, yeah, I do not know a whole lot about the history. I do know that when I grew up going to Catholic school, many of these cities were Jewish cities, like where, Jerusalem, etc. And just based on that concept alone, should we go back and say, oh, no, it's not free Palestine, it's free Israel, it's right? Or Judea, or whatever it was.
I mean, when I was in Israel, this was last December, it's really fascinating because they're doing all this archaeological work. And they're finding out that many of these artifacts are coming up now that are validating the Hebrew scriptures. I mean, people for a long time think about it. There was no independent evidence that Jeremiah or, these prophets of the old David or Saul ever existed. But suddenly you pull out a medallion or you pull out a writing and it's like King Saul, King Solomon. You suddenly realize, wow, there's the historicity of the Old Testament is being affirmed by secular modern Israeli archaeologists. Now, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, it's establishing the historic claim of the Jews to Israel.
Well, actually, I went to a coin store and they had one of the old coins that was minted around the time of the birth of Christ and is believed. I don't know if the coin that I bought was one of the coins used by St. Casper, but it was the same currency used by St. Casper. And my understanding is after researching about it, buying the coin, it's verified, historical, in like a box and sealed and graded and all that stuff, that quite literally, yes, there was a guy. He was given currency. It was minted for him so they could fund his trip. Don't know if that specific coin was used by him, but around this time, I gifted that to Seamus because I thought it was, it meant something historically. But yeah, generally, this stuff happened, right? Whether or not you believe in the greater faith-based narratives of the religions or whatever is something else. But these people were here. They did these things.
Exactly. I mean, that's the point.
They control it, and they're the civilized force there now.
Yeah.
But the left is always against civilization.
And the left is inconsistent. I mean, there is a lot of brutality in that region that the left doesn't care about, right? Like Coptic Christians are murdered in Egypt regularly. Their churches are bombed, their priests are murdered, and we never hear the left saying, this is terrible, we should go in for this underdog, right? They just pretend it doesn't happen. And I wonder if that's because they're ignorant on the complexity of the region, or if it's because they just...
I mean, Anne is right about this, because think about it. You've got blacks who are gunned down by other blacks in Chicago every day. Clearly, people are not ignorant about that. But at the same time, they act like that's not happening either.
But then
It's just-
how do they justify, I mean, I don't think they do, but is there a way for them to justify to these donors at Harvard why they pick some sides and not others? Because they're completely inconsistent in how they enforce
usually
this theoretical...
the big donors wouldn't care. They're going to take the side of the violent ones, of the primitive ones. I mean, it's kind of why they don't have cognitive dissonance. They're the donors are the top of the heap of the civilization, the civilized world, but it's just cute, it's fun. They don't BLM. Oh, I'll write a check. Now that it comes to something close to home, and this was just a hideous attack on Israel. I mean, I don't think it matters whether it was how far it goes back. You don't slaughter civilians like this.
And they lie about everything. Here, I'll tell you my challenge.
They do lie.
The left lies about everything endlessly. It is mind numbing. Every day I have to track the stuff. And as someone who's somewhat, years ago I come into, hey, this story's happening. It was 2014, Protective Edge. I knew very little about Israel, Palestine. And I'm trying to understand what's going on. And I get these leftists saying, look, Israel indiscriminately bombs, they kill civilians, and these poor Palestinians are in an open air prison. And I'm like, interesting. And then I knew a journalist who was fair and balanced. And he's like, I've been to Israel. Here's what I saw. It was horrifying. The rockets were exploding. I went to Palestine. It was horrifying. Here's what I saw. And I'm like, that's interesting. I was like, maybe this truth is closer to the middle. And then what happens? Half the stories I heard about Palestine were all lies. They're lying about what Israel actually did. And then it's like, okay, is Israel innocent? Well, it's war, so there's going to be collateral damage and problems. But every single time it comes to these arguments, the left lies to me. I have no choice but to be like, I must give Israel the benefit of the doubt because you keep lying about everything. Right. And Israel may be lying too, but it seems like they're lying less than you're lying. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do other than say, when Hamas goes and kills a bunch of women and children, and I'm told by the pro-Palestinian side that, well, yes, that's a target of opportunity. They're doing that to gain leverage and capture people and drag them back to Gaza as bargaining chips. I'm like, so you admit your tactic is to indiscriminately target civilians? Well, Israel's saying they're trying not to target civilians, and it's unfortunate that it happens. I'm sorry, it sounds like you guys are evil.
Right.
Sure. I mean, there's that video on social media of the Palestinian parent who's telling his kid to go throw the rock. Yeah. And you can tell the soldiers are really uncomfortable because the parent is egging his kid on, and he's telling the Israeli guy, shoot the kid, shoot the kid. It's almost like he's looking for a propaganda with his own kid. I mean, it's almost inconceivable. A point about these donors, though, because it doesn't make sense that you got all these rich guys who are doing super well. They're multimillionaires. Why they would fund, quote, barbarism? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Why are they continuing to give to these universities? And I think it is because the left has sort of captured the trophies of high culture, the Lincoln Center. And so in a capitalist society, you've got people who do really well, they make a lot of money, but they always have this little anxiety that they don't have culture. And so they want to buy culture. And the way you buy culture is you give money to Harvard, and then you get on the board. Or you get on the board of the Lincoln Center, and you don't really care what they stand for, what they do. You walk into the museum, you can't understand any of the art, but the point is you don't want to be seen as a guy who's a barbarian and a Philistine, and you don't know what art is, so you're like, I need to be on the board of the Lincoln Center, and then I will be seen as not only a rich guy, but a very cultured guy.
There's something to that, but they also, most of them did go to the temples of high culture like Harvard and Yale. And I don't know, I see too many Black Lives Matter signs. And what's that one? In this house, we believe, hung up, in the Hamptons, in places like Palm Beach, huge, Black Lives Matter. That is them taking a side. Yeah, it's chic. It's definitely chic, but it's always on the side of the barbarians and the violent. That's how they show how cool they are and how rich they are, because they don't need to worry about what you were saying about civilized society. They don't need the police. They live a safe life, so they have the luxury of pretending to support.
Of promoting violence in someone else's life.
Castro, Black Lives Matter.
They're unlearned, unworldly, naive, unsophisticated individuals who blindly march along with whatever they think the narrative is so they can fit in. Many of these people know what they're doing is wrong, but are scared to speak out against it. Those are cowards, and they provide donations to this. But I think the simple thing is, you made the joke about, Palestine will take all the Palestinians, they can have the illegal immigrants. A joke we often make is, we'll take the Venezuelans if they take our leftists. Because the people in Venezuela fleeing leftism, at the very least, will... But it's a joke, right? And so the issue is,
they voted for it.
These
it's
leftists,
not like it was imposed on them in Venezuela.
And now they're running from it.
They voted for it.
But the leftists in the United States have never been to Venezuela. And the funny thing, you take an American leftist and bring them to Caracas, they'll likely be murdered. When I went down I went down to Venezuela, I think 9 years ago with Vice. And we were covering the uprising that was happening. It was interesting. It was the wealthier individuals protesting against the government because their lives were being destroyed by these policies. And 4 or 5 times, someone would walk up to me and go, "Where are you from?" And I know what happens if I say America. So I would say Vice magazine. And they would say, "No, where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, Vice is a Canadian magazine." And they'd walk away. If I said I'm an American, something bad's going to happen.